Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode one of the Caregiving Entrepreneur. This is the second in the Smart Talks with One Smart Lady series. And this week, we will introduce my co-host, Nathan Grimes. Nathan will be talking about his experience taking care of his late wife and also how challenging it was to provide for the family, being the only one working at that time. Then our first guest for Caregiving Entrepreneur will be Marilyn Morales. She is founder and CEO of Izzy's Legacy. She is also TV host at Unscripted with Marilyn Morales. So let's get into watching and listening to Nathan tell his story about his experience as a caregiving entrepreneur.
I was trying to work and build villages. I was in business for myself. I was in the insurance industry, and I was out trying to keep money flowing in the business. And coming home and trying to take care of her. Now, she was able to do some things, but then I had to do some things too to help her out. She wasn't totally out of the picture at that moment, but she was limited. She was very limited in what she could do. At that time, we didn't know really what her illness was, what was causing all the problems she was having. So there's a level of frustration that comes from that because you don't know when you're going to be needed at home when you need to be out making a living. And that is a struggle as a caregiver, is not knowing where to be at what the right time. Because there was times when I would have to not go on appointments just to be able to take her to the doctor, to be there in case she needs me, and then the next thing you know, she's in the hospital, which takes me out of production and trying to take care of her while she's in the hospital, which makes it hard. So that is a little bit about where I'm coming from as a working in business and everything, and trying to find that balance. To me, the hardest part of being a caregiver was trying to be a part-time caregiver and a breadwinner at the same time. Now, I could be a good breadwinner, but I could not do both of them very well. And I guess I could say that I was a reluctant caregiver at that moment. And so this is a little bit about what I have done in the past. Now, why was it such a struggle? I don't know. I think it was me and the resistance of me wanting to be out making a living instead of trying to take care of things. I don't know if this answers the question that you want to get covered on this at this point, as being in the financial side or time management. It is a time management problem because you have to know when appointments are going to be, where you need to be at any time, not only in your business side, but also in taking care of your spouse. So that was an issue that I had to go through and I faced.
That's great. No, you answered the question exactly the way I had hoped it was. I mean, it doesn't have to be a perfect answer. It has to be from your heart. And as you're thinking of it, did you have any help as you said, you had to work? Did you have anybody that you could reach out and ask for help?
The interesting is because of my relationship with my church family, I did have people that I could call in. We did have some family living in the area. That is, at one time, one of my granddaughters came in and actually moved in to assist me to be here full time, taking care of that. And she was with us for 2 or 3 years, just living with us. That became a problem within itself because she had a child, and it became where she could not do the job I wanted her to do. And so that was a struggle there. But then we had people from our home congregation, which we have been members of over 40 years, that they would come in and help out, bring food in. Some people would come and take her somewhere when I couldn't be here. So there was help. Now, was there any other professional help? Yes, we had caregivers from some of the home health care agencies that came out, which are very good to have. But that usually was those people came after a hospital event because they would have to be there during the time after the hospital. And they were very limited because being under Medicare, they only have so much time that Medicare will allow them to come into your home. But we also had people coming doing physical therapy at the house. So, and then there was times we had to take her in to do physical therapy. That's time consuming again. So there was a lot of issues with that.
Were you Were you limited? Oh, let me rephrase that. Tell me about during the COVID.
Now,
Was your
during COVID was an interesting year because this was actually the last year of her life. I was actually here full time during that time. But there was a blessing in that during COVID because we were already limited being home almost all the time anyway. And at that time we got to the point where our doctor visits were mainly done online, and because our doctor did not want her to come in to be subject because of her low resistance. This was the year that we had a lot of make the major decisions when she was making a decision to stop her even stopping her medications because she was tired. So we had a lot of issues during that time. Neither one of us ever had to deal with COVID. Neither one of us ever was exposed to it. In fact, I wasn't exposed to it till after she passed, and that was almost a year after she passed before I ever came down with it myself. But it was never a major issue for us. Now, would it be for somebody in other places? It could be, but we were blessed not to have to deal with that too much.
Nathan? What did you do about your self-care? How did you take care of you?
That is the hardest thing. I have to admit, during that time, I probably didn't do a good job of taking care of myself. I was putting off doing some things that I need doing. I was already having a lot of back trouble back then, but I just postponed it. I was needing surgery on my foot, but I postponed it because my opinion was I had to be here for her. And I actually did put off a lot of medical care for myself. The relief I had was, again, having people that I could call and talk to. I would say that I was blessed by having two sons that really took care of me because they were always in contact with me. And even though they one of them didn't live here at that time, but during some of that time, but then they all moved out of town. So I didn't have anybody here very much around. Even a few didn't have any hardly grandkids living here. So it was a lonely time for me in that aspect. But I will say that part of my time was just doing what was helping me during that time. That she encouraged me when I wrote my first book. It was during that time. It was during that last 3 years of her life when I wrote my first book because she encouraged me to do it. So that was a relief that I found in doing that. And that encouragement was able that after she did pass is when I about a month after that, I finally finished my original draft on that book. So that helped me a lot there. That was sort of my relief during that time, doing the research, doing the writing. And so that's what pushed me into doing all the things I do now.
That's good because that was my next question was to talk about your experience writing that first book.
That's an interesting experience because what happened on that one, because if you look at the title of the book was Jesus Teach Us How to Pray. I'd always heard that one of the best ways to pray is to talk to God with God's own words. And the emphasis of that book was, let's talk to God from what God has to say and open our hearts through God's own word back to him. Or if Jesus says, put me first, well, what does that mean? Put me first. Talk to God about putting him first. And so the book was a little bit about that. But then as I did the research, I looked at, well, what is this thing about Jesus Teach Us How to Pray? Who do I need to talk to? And I looked at the aspect of talking to God as the Father, talking to God as Jesus the Savior, and then talking to God as the Holy Spirit living in me. So it all became that prayer was part of that, of doing all of that together. And then to realize that prayer was also led me in the writing of the relationship, because we had to build that relationship with God to be able to talk to God. That was the idea of my very first book. And then after that, it built that one up that I would go further in the idea of building relationships.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there anything else that you think that I should be asking you? Because you pretty much covered everything.
Well, you open it up because it just let me talk about what my experience was. Was there, I look back to some of that questions on that balancing business and help caregiving, and it is a balancing act. It is, you feel like you've got, instead of 3 balls in the air all the time, you got 4 or 5 balls. because you never know what's going to come up next. We didn't know what ball was going to hit the floor and how that splash is going to hurt our situations at that moment. And because there was always something that would come up, a sudden illness, a sudden problem that we have, a change in medications. These are things that you have to stop whatever you're doing and do something else. And so that was part of it right there too. Yeah, there is a balance. I go back to when I was trying to make a living and then trying to take care of her. You go out to make a living, but your mind's back here. And that's the problem you have. Or your mind's out here and you think, I need to be out here making some money. And when you're self-employed, you're not making money unless you're out there.
That's right.
And so it was a challenge. It was a definitely, and then the fear that when you're out in the fields, all at once you're going to get a call. And that call is going to say, your wife's in the hospital. This happened to me many times. In fact, on one event, I was actually on a conference meeting in Las Vegas with my company. I had drove out there by myself, which is a 2-day drive from here. And I was at the conference, and in about just before the conference was going to end, I get a telephone call that Connie's in the hospital. And I have to get everything packed up on a Sunday afternoon, leave that convention, start driving home late in there, and I had to stop on the road, and you're worried all the way home. Mm. So that happens. That's just part of being a caregiver. Mm. That you're going to have those events happen in your life. And I have to say, as I look back at being a caregiver, there were periods before her major disability, back in when she had cancer in 1998. I had the same experience back then. And I was only 40 years old at the time. Let's see, well, that was 1980. Yeah, I had just turned 31 years of age when that happened then. I had to be a full-time employee, a full-time worker. But I had a wife in the hospital who just had cancer surgery. And so, yeah, fortunately then her parents came out to help take care of things while I was working. And so there's an advantage of family back then that I didn't have now. But I had 2 small boys. Mm-hmm. So it's just a multiplication. But everybody's got experience of being a caregiver at some point in their life. They just don't realize they have been. They just think, well, it's just an event in life. Caregiving is something that all of us are going to do at some point, in some way, whether we know it or not. And as I often say, I have been a reluctant caregiver most of my life because that's just not natural. Mm. But I had to be a better one and had to grow into it.
That was one of my questions. How did your personality and your essence change over the time of being a caregiver?
I've always said, now, I don't know if anybody's ever studied personality. In the sphere of personalities, you've got a yellow personality, you've got a blue personality, you've got a green personality, and you've got a red one. Now, I will tell you right up, I am basically a green personality. And a green person is very analytical. A green personality is always focused on the facts. Give me the facts, get out of the way, let me do whatever I got to do. It's just sort of straight-laced in some ways. And one of the problems with a green personality and one of the faults of a green personality is I'm always right. Guess what that means? You're wrong. I had to slowly learn that, I don't always have to be right. I don't have to be right. Now, do I want to be certain things? I want to make sure everything adds up right? Yes. But I don't have to live like everybody else is wrong. So that was where my personality took a major change.
I love that. I love that. I haven't gotten into the colors spectrum yet,
I used to train people on these personalities. So it's a fascinating study, really.
Do you find let's see if this makes sense. What color are most people who aren't conscious of who they are when they come to take this test? And once they take this assessment, is it a surprise that I'm like that? No, I'm
Some
not like
people, it's a total surprise. Some people you can nail right off the bat. I usually can talk to people within about just about 5 or 10 minutes, and I can tell you a little bit more about their personality, about what they're. Now, keep in mind, everybody's got a little bit of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
All have a predominant personality. And so a dominant personality would be like a yellow personality is one who's a very caring, is always about taking care of the other person. They are the natural caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
But they have their shortcomings too. A blue personality is what we call the one is I want to have funny, so don't talk to me unless it's fun. That's a blue personality. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, the red personalities are people who are basically the people in control. They're the colonels in the army. They are the CEOs of a corporation. Mm-hmm. And it's do it my way and get out of my way, type thing. So you get a little bit of the fun of doing it, but you can talk to people and get a real strong feel about who they are in a very short period of time. Because sometimes there's certain words that are used that tells you that too. So yeah, and I had to learn to find some of the other traits that apply to myself and find where I can find those traits that help me be what I am now. And as many of you may not know, I've remarried within the last year and a half, and it's good that I now know myself better than what I did then. So I got well trained before Ginger came into my life.
That was my next question. I was going to ask you how this growth period of really learning who you were affect your new relationship with your new wife, Ginger.
I think it's made it better. We have a better. We communicate better. I think that's there's a warmth that we did that I'll be honest. I got very lonely towards the end of Connie's life. I went through the depression of loss before she actually passed.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of her disease. And there was times I would be sitting here just like I am at this computer right now, in tears, and feeling the loneliness of being by myself, even though she was in the room behind me. Right. Because she was out of it. She was not really here. And there's that sense of loneliness that sets in a long time. And I had the last 6-7 years, I was a full-time caregiver, and that was when she was at her lowest during that time, especially about the last 2 years. So, or I said the last year and a half, really. Mm-hmm. So you go through a lot of experiences. Now, I actually came home and retired in 2014, which that hit the pocketbook a big time too, because we lost all of our assets, or we lost all of our money because we tried to take care of her and not able to work function. So we narrowed down that we were living on just what we had in Social Security. And so that made it financially, it was a real hard time. And the blessing came that I had people who helped me out during that time. So I always look back and knowing that I've been blessed totally because of people that's helped me during my difficult times.
The second episode in the Caregiving Entrepreneur will be my story, where I talk about my traveling in business during my first marriage with Donald Carper before he passed, and the struggle I had having to provide for our family. And then my second husband, Willie Smart, who, thank God, I was working from home and I was able to take care of him. So I'll be talking about that in episode 2. So now let's get on with Marilyn Morales' story of her experience with her baby, Isabella.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Morales, president of Izzy's Legacy Incorporated. Our nonprofit organization focuses on the minority population. And why is that, you may ask? Well, I myself am Latina, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City. But it is an unfortunate circumstance that led me to my mission today. In 2007, I had an infant daughter, 7 months old, who was diagnosed with a rare leukemia. The only chance for treatment and survival was a bone marrow transplant. It was heartbreaking. But knowing that no one in my family was a match for my daughter was what propelled me to make sure that no other family would have the same outcome that we did. We had to search on an outside registry called the NMDP Bone Marrow Registry for a stranger to literally save our daughter's life. That was heartbreaking enough. We did find her match, fortunately, but she did succumb to complications of having cancer 6 months later. But had it not been for that individual, we would not have had 6 months more with my daughter. Now, why is there such a disparity? Well, when she was diagnosed, we were told that there was not a presence of Latino, African American, and mixed ethnicity individuals on that registry, so that our search would be difficult. We were encouraged to get on television, to get into the newspaper, and to have as many drives as possible in order to increase chances that we would find her match. Well, we did all those things. We did find her match, fortunately, but that individual was not on that registry when we started our search. He came later. He joined because he was moved by a similar story, a coworker whose daughter was also suffering from leukemia. He joined in hopes of matching that little girl, but matched a little Puerto Rican girl in New Jersey. Now, the bigger story here is that he himself was Caucasian, or is, but he had a small amount of diversity within him. His paternal grandmother was of Mexican descent. That small amount of diversity allowed him to match my daughter at a higher level than anyone in her family. The message here is bigger. How connected we are as individuals, as people, as humans. You have the ability to save someone's life in life. I encourage you to visit izzy'slegacyinc.org for more information. This mission is greater than all of us. We also help financially those on a cancer journey. Cancer is expensive. I know this firsthand. We went from having a 2-family income down to a 1-income family. I had to be in the hospital with my daughter. There was not a lot of opportunity for me to go to work and to help support my family. Had it not been for the kindness of the strangers in the community where I lived, we would have lost it all. And because we went through that, we are paying this forward. We vowed, my husband and I, at that time, that we would be able to repay those strangers. And that's why we formed Izzy's Legacy. How can you help? There are so many ways to be able to support them in any way that we can. In addition to that, Izzy's Legacy vows to continue to educate and help that disparity that exists within our communities. And the only way to do that is for us to get out there and be present in those communities. Your funds will help us to do that. I encourage you to visit izzy'slegacyinc.org for more information. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I want to thank you all for joining us in this episode, and I look forward to the next time. This is Deb Smart saying thank you so much for joining us with this episode. Be blessed, and remember, self-care as you care for others is very important. Take care.